to be working towards.
3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7:51.
In this climate of camaraderie between science and the media, anything seemed possible. But it was one image in particular that changed the way we looked at the world.
For all the people back on Earth, the crew of Apollo 8 has a message that we would like to send to you. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good earth.
I think when people saw the Earth from space, they suddenly realised there's this precious jewel that needed to be protected, and I think that affected us culturally, and that was where environmental matters suddenly went to the top of the political agenda.
Against the background of a growing environmental movement and the technological advances which allowed computers to create climate predictions for the first time, a new vision of the end of the world surfaced as scientists predicted a return to the Ice Age.
In the great ice sheet that buries Greenland, the snowfalls of 1,000 centuries are piled up, 2 miles in thickness. The air is thin here, and remote from anywhere in the fastness of the ice, men have planted a frail encampment. They're drilling for ancient ice deep under the surface. The greater the depth, the greater the age. But how can you tell of changes in the climate just from the ice?
These microfossils are telling me that at the end of the last warm period, like the one we're living in, about 120,000 years ago, ice began accumulating very quickly indeed. Averaged over northern lands, it must have been accumulating at something like 18 inches a year. We are forced to imagine, instead of the old idea of an ice sheet accumulating very slowly, something very rapid happening.
18 inches a year. Nature can act a lot more suddenly than anyone had imagined until now. Unless we learn otherwise, it will be prudent to suppose that the next ice age could begin to bite at any time.
As a kid growing up in the 70s, the prediction that we were entering an ice age had a big impact on me growing up, and by now I thought that I'd be like an Eskimo living in an igloo.
After a series of difficult winters, the media pushed the story to its limits, leaving no one in any doubt that the Ice Age would soon be upon us.
"It's the new Ice Age," said Brian. "We shall all be frozen in our beds. Look at my lettuce."
Having quickly accepted the inevitability of an Ice Age, television was keen to expound any theory as to its causes.
A man-made dust pall is spreading over the Earth. The use of the soil in a dry country produces dust which the wind blows into the air. This dust, all added together, spreads around the world, blots out the sun, and causes cooling on a worldwide scale.
What happened was that the first computer models came up and they started plugging numbers into the computer predictions of the future of what the Earth's atmosphere. And it's a little bit like trying to design a sports car on a microprocessor, the one that I had as a kid. The computers were so basic, it's a very tall order to try and do a prediction. So they put all these numbers into the models, and what was predicted was instead of temperatures rising, temperatures would reduce. And I think really one of the problems is it caused a sort of credibility gap for a lot of climate predictions.
The point was a group could see the potential power of computing, but the actual programs and technology took 20 years to unfold before you could get to that point where they could model in a sophisticated manner the process they were trying to model. So it was a sort of romance of the computer.
There was a famous case, I think it was about 1978, where climate modelers had spent millions on a computer program to predict the future climate. And they said at the end of it, we can show that it's cold in winter, and warm in summer. And a congressman just went crazy and said, I could tell you that. But that was how basic the computer models were, that you need to be able to do that before you can go to the next step. And the problem is that the next steps, if you look at those predictions, it was the big freeze was going to happen, but never happened, won't ever happen.
Temperatures soared, and the mid-1970s witnessed some of the hottest summers on record. The notion of an ice age evaporated as quickly as it had appeared.
So Zebedee made it warm again. "Why has it suddenly gone hot?" said Dougal. "Phew, it's boiling. I can't hibernate in this weather. I'd be a laughing stock."
By the early 1980s, things were hotting up in the Cold War too, and fears of a frozen climate had been replaced by those of a nuclear winter. With even Western leaders seemingly prepared to press the nuclear button, the drama Threads arrived on our screens and terrified all who watched it.
Jesus Christ, they've done it. They've done it.
Threads showed a believable, if terrifying, image of the apocalypse. The media, caught up in this mood, began to focus on what, if any chance we might have, of surviving this nightmare.
The Home Office published this pamphlet, Protect and Survive, in May 1980. Most of the booklet tells you how to shelter from the fallout that may follow an attack. There's little on how to deal with the immediate effects. These preparations took all day. There was a problem in finding enough heavy materials for the necessary shielding. There was no advice on blast protection. How would they survive at 3¼ miles? As far as heat is concerned, quite well. Although the paint on the windows will burn, the whitewash keeps 80% of the heat out. There may be fires in unprotected houses nearby, but Joy and Eric should survive, at least for 17 seconds. After that, the blast demolishes their terrace of houses.
3 decades after Hiroshima, the world was finally taking the threat of the bomb seriously. But the government's farcically inadequate guidelines provided rich pickings for a new generation of comedians.
Supposing you have survived, right? What do? They give you the advice here. This is true. A most valuable service which everyone could render would be the control of flies by such means as fly sprays and vigorous swatting campaigns. And remember to pile all the bodies into little neat stacks so we can find the flies easy enough to get them. And that's another thing. How come the flies have survived the nuclear blast? What do they do in 4 minutes that we don't know?
I think what happened in the 80s was that, for better or worse, in a number of societies, you had this sense of powerlessness, which became institutionalized. That accounts for the fact that the various movements that are into propagating panics have become so successful. It accounts for the fact that we do become mistrustful of authority. It accounts for the fact that we continually believe anybody who says that something bad is going to happen.
The paranoia many in the West had come to feel was spectacularly realised in 1986, not by a nuclear war, but by the environmental catastrophe created when the Chernobyl